need some more than speed records in this day and age. You need coverage.
Coverage? Oh, you mean them little root weevils that crawl around popping off cameras in your face?
Yeah, those root weevils write history.
Many of you know that quote by Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Well, you can, and Event Horizons will give you those truths. So when you're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore from that memorable senior network, you'll know just what to do. We will draw you in and become your news addiction at Event Horizons. Join us Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time at freedomslips.com. At Revolution Radio. Our world team members are Dennis Fetcho, John Ilias, David Dunger, Hyla Cass, MD, Melanie Bridgeton, Jim Mars, Paula Harris, John Trallo, Maria Payan, Christopher Husser, DODDS, Jonathan Orchard, and me, your anchor, Dr. Robin Falco.
If you decide not to volunteer, it will not be held against you in any way.
Sounds dangerous.
It is. Very dangerous.
Count me in.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another extra big-ass fries?
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please
What?
come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
Come
trouble.
on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
Hello, everyone. Good day, good evening, depending where you are in the world. This is Researchers on a Mission Radio. I'm your host, Joe Kiernan. Tonight, of course, as always, co-hosted by Dave Stinnett. Dave, how are you tonight, my man?
Good evening, Joe. Bracing for another big snowstorm.
Oh, of course. Of course. What else is new?
Yeah.
You're really getting nailed this year. The whole Northeast is getting clobbered.
I've had enough snow.
Yeah. None down here. We had tons of ice, but no snow. But you could be getting another half a foot or so. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's what they're saying. It's like anywhere from 6 to 12.
Wow, that's incredible. Wow.
So it's being stuck in the house pretty much this weekend and getting prepared. And getting the spring conference roster together. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, that's coming up quick.
Yeah, it is. As a matter of fact, it's April 12th, and I've got a killer lineup.
Well, who do we got on the lineup?
We got Rich Dolan.
Mm-hmm.
I got Rob Schock, the geologist that was basically made the case that there was water around the Sphinx.
Mm-hmm. That's two big ones right there.
Yeah. Nick Redfern,
Excellent, excellent.
Rob Skiba. Rob Skiba does kind of like UFOs and stuff from a biblical angle, but he does this one talk. It's called the Mount Harmon Roswell connection, and it's a real interesting take.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, and then James Carman, the guy who just the filmmaker who made the new movie The Hidden Hand, which is one.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. That's a killer lineup, man.
It's a good run.
Yeah, that's coming up quick. But it's only about 6 weeks away on you, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Ooh, that's gonna come quick. I know it felt like spring the last few days here. I think we were in maybe in the low 70s here today. Sun was blazing. Spring was in the air.
People were posting pictures of their crab trees in bloom. I'm just like, what's going on? Because it's still freezing here.
Well, usually down here, I think spring usually starts. Like a good rule of thumb is March 1st. It's springtime. It's like all grass and flowers start blooming March 1st. It's just a few weeks ahead of you guys up there.
Yeah, it'll start to break before too long.
That's true. But last time I was up there, when I was living up in the Northeast last, I remember there was a big April blizzard.
Oh, we get them.
Yeah, winters, it'll sneak up on you. It doesn't always end up there. But everything's been good. UFO world seems to be picking up. I'm hearing a lot of cool reports coming in lately. You hear of anything really big, interesting going on lately?
I actually took this report from a pilot this week, and he was saying how he had seen, he's out having a smoke, as usual.
Of course.
And this thing comes whizzing by, and he says it's about a mile out, and well, he was on the ground, but he goes, it was kind of changing and like morphing into something, and then it would go back into its form. And it was a strange account for someone who has an eyeball for that type of stuff, but
well, they do have trained eyes.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Then we get the usual bevy of UFO videos, going around. They've got one, I think a third phase, which everybody kind of keeps an eye on because they're CGI guys and nobody really buys anything they're selling anymore. But they have a crazy video up, and it's funny because there's an overhead shot of whatever it is. And I just kind of posed the question. I'm just like, well, if you stumble up on this thing, wouldn't you get a chance to get an overhead shot of it? And everybody's like, yeah, hey, that's a good question. I'm just like, yeah.
It is a good question.
It's bizarre. And there's another video out, and it's kind of a cool video. I think it's one of Mojo's video.
Man,
but
he puts them out.
They're saying they're like they're aliens behind these lit up windows, and you can't really tell what it is. But I made the crack basically that it looks like it's an old bald headed guy eating his dinner with the television on in the next room, which is what it kind of looks like to me. But
it's probably more often the case.
So yeah, you're blowing this stuff up all week.
But considering Mojo, I know he's got some quality films. He does.
Yeah, he's got some pretty far out action.
And I like the whole way he goes about his investigations and his videos. He's got a good little team set up there. He's been very helpful to a lot of people too. So I respect the man and his work.
Well, but I'd respect a whole lot more if he let me come out.
Well, that's more like a challenge, though. That's more,
It's not really a challenge, but I'm old school. I got to see it to believe it. Let me roll out with my gear and let's go hunting.
Isn't that a fact, though? I would love to. I know he's very protective of his area.
Yeah, that's what you got. That's the cool thing about Allison Cruz is that she'll take you to her area and you can do it. But I understand perfectly guys who have a hot spot and want to keep it under wraps. There's quite a few guys that I know who have these things, and from time to time I get invited to come out to them, but I can kind of understand hoarding your area.
Yeah, and there's some people where it might be close to their homes, and it's a little, sometimes you don't want to bring a lot of people around your house if you're family person per se. I might be able to relate to some things like this.
Yeah, at least, some of us would be sleeping out in somebody's field, and you don't know whose field you're actually sleeping in.
Well, I hope Tim C's listening tonight. Obviously, everyone, Tim C is not joining us tonight. He's he's got himself a new location, and he's got himself in a pretty good spot by Pine Bush right now, Dave.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and great access for some filming where he's just relocated to. So, Tim, if you're listening, we say hello, and we hope you're settling in nice. Just, I hope you have snow shovels with you. I know you're going to need them. There's a joke that old timers say down here on the golf course. They say when they moved down here, they loaded up all their stuff in their car and on their car from the Northeast. And as they were driving south, as soon as they got to a point where someone said, "Hey, what's that thing on your roof?" They said, "That's a snow shovel." They said, that's where they pulled over and called it home. That's here. So it's the truth. People would say, "What in God's name is that thing? What kind of dirt are you going to shovel with that?" That's what they would say around here.
That's great.
Yeah. But, we got a good program tonight. We're going to be talking about out-of-place artifacts that are out of place, where they should be ultimately found. They're found in completely different areas on the globe or in a different time, a different place. Just irregular artifacts that there's really no answer as to why they're there or why they should be there. Some are arguable with the dates they were created, and then there's others that are completely fascinating that they were even created at all. And I'll start, Dave. I'll start it off with one of my favorites is the Antikythera mechanism. Okay? Yeah. We got this. And I would imagine no matter where you found this thing on Earth, it would be out of place, right? This is one of those things that it's tossed around where its origins really could have been from, because it's the compositions of it, the thought process that went into it to calculate the astronomical positions with time and with your location on Earth. These are fascinating accomplishments to be able to just calculate on one's own or on paper, to put it into a design and get all the gearing right. When gears are supposed to be somewhat primitive at this point, really up until a couple centuries ago, that the engineering feat of getting the right design, the right circumference, the right amount of teeth, the right amount of movement on all of these gears. I believe there was over 24 gears in here. And they've got this thing working completely properly. And it was found in right around the turn of the 20th century, a shipwreck off of the little island town of Antikythera, thus the name. And even Jacques Cousteau had returned to the site in the 70s, but nothing else was turned up. They were hoping to find other pieces or something related to it, but they feel it's dated to the 1st century BC, and it's really unknown how they came about that. It was believed that it was from a lot of the pottery jars that were found along with it, but it also that seems to be an early report that came in, because in the inventory that came in, there was no pottery, and there really wasn't much. There really wasn't much except some metal and a few pieces of what they believe was a wooden box that housed the mechanism, and possibly some pieces of wood that was a ship. And so they were saying that it's also possible, for whatever reason, a ship threw this thing overboard, because they really can't put the wood with the boat. The wood would be much earlier. It would have been 500-600 years ago. However, they feel this box is a strong 2,000 years old, and the device is at least 2,000 years old. So if they just found this mechanism with the wooden box housing, that would be quite strange that nothing else like a shipwreck was found nearby, because I would imagine this thing had some weight to it.
What they date it to, Joe?
1st century BC. They feel they were quite confident in somewhere from the year 0 to 100 BC, but again, that was based upon what was believed to be pottery along with the wreck. But in recent investigations, it turns out there really wasn't much proof of a wreck at all. Just some debris that was picked up, and some wooden debris where, as I mentioned, they believed was part of a shipwreck. But ultimately, the only things that really came of it were this mechanism and a wooden box that was believed to have originally housed this mechanism. And it's got 30 gears. And the largest gear is 140 millimeters, and it's got 223 teeth on it. So that's quite incredible to align this thing up with 29 other gears. And, just to get that to work and tell time would be incredible. Even, Dave, as you and I were talking, even in the art of watchmaking and just timekeeping alone, just the timekeeping, not even the astronomical device, just the timekeeping alone, we really perfected that in the 16th century in Central Europe, more Germany area, where they were getting the gears just right, but they were handcrafting all of these gears. Each gear was individually hand cut, and usually some gold, because it was easy to work with. And
I had seen a program where the guy was actually making a replica of the Antikythera mechanism, and he had taken, I don't know if it was a piece of brass, because brass was soft enough to work with, and I'm not really sure what he was using to file it down, because I remember thinking the whole time, well, where'd they get the files from? What are they using to file this stuff down? But it was very time consuming and very brilliantly done. When you're making gears like this, it's all laid out mathematically, and it's all very precision wear, and the Antikythera mechanism does quite a few different functions. So whoever was putting this together, even for 2,000 years ago, and that had to be in existence before that. Right. So somebody was on the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, because this really wasn't something that would have come out of someone's garage per se. This came out of a fine craftsman's workshop, where they were most likely making other kinds of devices. This really isn't a random, isolated engineering feat, in my opinion, because it's so complex to have 30 different gears. It's like finding a handcrafted pocket watch that does 12 different things, to tell you where constellations are going to be, what cycle the moon is, what time it is, day or night, where you are, where you need to be, how long it's going to take you to get there, tell you when the next eclipse is going to be. It's basically called an analog computer.
I think they have working models of it, Joe. I think, or variations. I believe they think the Antikythera mechanism is more advanced than those, because those look fairly basic. But they do have like sort of versions of this that actually survived antiquity. So, and these being less complicated to this, and this looking like it's older than it. Maybe this was something that was, mass manufactured once upon a time.
Right. I mean, there is a possibility this was much older and passed down, because it seems like they really weren't basing much upon the dating of the device itself. And if they were dating the wood, I mean, wooden box is a wooden box. What's striking is that we don't have any other examples on a smaller scale, of a 10-gear mechanism or a 5-gear mechanism from this time, or for another 1,000 years, really.
Yeah, really. I mean, you're talking maybe 1,300 years from that point, we start seeing,
where we really started using gears.
Yeah.
For its physics properties.
Yeah, I mean, the Chinese had water clocks, but those water clocks were run on water, but they were all geared up. So, and they were fairly ancient and sophisticated for their, the time that they were being built.
It's just another example of knowledge lost. It's a fine example of it, because this wasn't something that happened overnight here. Someone put a lot of work into this, or more likely, a culture put a lot of work into this. It was something developed in time, in possibly a great thinker's studio or craft shop, artisan shop. It's an engineering feat. It's absolutely incredible. It's considered an eighth wonder, although I've heard there's about 8 different 8 wonders now. But it's a wonder, no doubt. It's
funny because you may be familiar with them, actually, Joe, but some of those, they're run on basically rope and weights and stuff, and they're like the Greek dioramas. But they're these dioramas basically that they made, and it's like a little mini play, but it's mechanized in front of you. Right. But it's just, they have all this, they have the gear movements and stuff like that, but it's like a Rube Goldberg thing. Once you start it, it runs a certain time and things click into certain panels, and it tells you this. It'll do like a story of Ulysses or something like that, and he'll be sailing across the sea, and there'll be water there in a boat, and once it hits a certain timing, a weight will drop, and then that stage will drop, and something else will pop up, and it'll be like the entire story. But when you look at it, you think that's ingenious,
right?
And they did it with simple gears basically, and winding ropes around sticks and weights and stuff like that. But it was brilliant, and you're like, these were people that are in antiquity, and they're pulling this type of stuff off.
Yeah, well, I know Leonardo da Vinci had he built a mechanized lion, where it was basically like a robot. It just walked around, and then in the 1700s, someone here we had. Do you ever hear of the Turk, the chess playing the chess playing Turk, the game? It was an automated mechanism that was made.
That's interesting now.
150, 200 years ago, so yeah. And this thing, obviously it was before computers, and it was just a whole bunch of series of gears and pulleys, and however this thing was crafted, it could beat anybody. It really reminds me a lot of that Zoltar guy from the movie Pig. It really does. It's got a really cool story. Look it up sometimes. The Turk chess player. He was beating everyone, all the best chess players, and challenged by royalties and different nations, and caused a big stir. Everyone wanted to see what was going on. They thought a tiny little person was in there, but I think it was ultimately lost in a fire, to be honest with you.
It's funny because I was watching a show on like ancient Chinese, inventions, and they had this one, and in my family you had to build your own car. That was your first car, the one that you built. So you're looking at this and you're like, yeah, that's like the valves of V8, and it was basically, I don't know whether they're using it for irrigation, but it was another water type clock. But it had all the little gears and valves and stuff like that, like an engine. It was a combustion engine, but it was being run on water, and they're using it in a different fashion than we would think of using the motor. But you're looking at it and you're like, yeah, that's brilliant. And then the guy comes up and he, basically says, if you're familiar with this type of stuff, this is an engine, blah blah blah.
So you had to build your own car?
You're like, and my family were motorheads, so.
Wow, that's pretty badass, man. That's not bad. What kind of car?
My 70 Chevelle was a nice car.
Wow. Yeah, I bet it was. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So what else do we have that's completely out of place and out of time, Dave?
One of my favorites and there's a couple of my favorites, but this one was always kind of interested me. In 1944, there's a guy named Newton Anderson in West Virginia, and he was, stoking his stove with coal, dropped one of the coal nuggets, and it broke open, and inside of it was this brass bell with an iron clapper inside of it. And they think it's hundreds of thousands of years old. This is kind of where the out-of-place artifacts, where my knowledge of the actual geology would need some work, but we find that some of these out-of-place artifacts are embedded in chunks of coal, in chunks of rock. So I think there's a debate. Some of these guys they're like, hey, this has got to be hundreds of thousands of years old, maybe millions of years old, because it's, they find some of this stuff 2 miles down in the strata, which is interesting in itself, because anything that's down, a couple hundred feet, it's old.
Right.
But,
yeah. It's old and most likely stone.
Yeah, exactly. Now you're talking a lot of this stuff they find in mines. So this particular bell, now people can go look for the Newton Anderson bell, I'm sure, on the web, and it doesn't look like anything that was manufactured in the 20th century. A lot of people think it looks like it's something from Persia or something from the Middle East.
It does. To me it does. To me it does.
To me it does too. And if you figure, if there was maybe a deluge at some point in history, and this stuff was already being made, there's nothing that says currents couldn't have washed it over here and it settled over here, for all we know. But I always thought that was an interesting one, because it doesn't look like anything that would ever be manufactured in North America anytime that we could remember. But it does look something out of,
It does, and it's
out of Babylon or something like that.
It's a strange piece to hoax. I would imagine if someone were trying to hoax it, they would try to pick something a little more recent. Maybe within a few hundred years of Columbus. Something that would hold some weight. But again, these pieces like this bell here, they were coming out of a mine. Well, a lot of people are mistaken. They think it's, in the mine where someone has a shovel, but these are actually coming out of a machined mine where they're cracking giant blocks of coal open, and there's things in there. And this bell's a good example of it.
Yeah, and they found a lot of stuff, and that's not. We have actually found a lot in the United States, but they've found it in China as well. I mean, they have out of place artifacts that they can't explain.
Yeah, that's very true, and but they have some seriously old culture there too. They sure do.
Yeah, for my money, it's probably one of the oldest, if not the oldest, on the planet.
Yeah, it's been there for a long time, and there's one that in one of the articles that we were discussing, the Bagong pipes. It's just a bunch of iron pipes, just sewage, water pipes, things of that nature. A couple thousand years old, no big deal. No big deal. Apparently, a city, no big deal. The city had water going to and from the city 2,000 years before it was known elsewhere in the world. It's rather incredible. Even at 16-inch iron pipes. It's incredible. They were casting pipes that big. It's incredible. It's like a regular sewage pipe on the street today.
Yep.
It's amazing. And then,
it's funny. You have a big, in the UFO world, we have the story of the Dropa stones. Now, the Dropa stones were supposed to be from this tiny little village that lived in some valley there that were, it said their ancestors were from outer space, and they had these little disc stones. Now, the funny thing is, if you look at the Dropa stones, they're round and they kind of have like a little chink taken out of them, like a little triangle. And when the ISS films first started coming out, especially the tether film, you could see those round things swimming around in the background, but you can also see them go behind. There's a huge one that goes behind the tether. And if you look at the Dropa stone looks exactly like that. The problem was they found out that the original story that was done on it, nobody could find who the actual author of it was. Nobody could find the Tibetan or Chinese anthropologist that supposedly had this stuff. And the people of the valley who was supposed to be from had it seems that the Dropastones can be taken off the list for OOPArts because I think Crichton, he's a UK guy, ran one of the UFO magazines over there, and a really good researcher. He started to dig into this stuff for the Dropastones and couldn't verify any of the story, then realized it was basically just contrived. So.
Hey, Dave, I wanted to mention Mark Eddy here at the station before. He sent me something in regards to the Turkish chess player that we were speaking about. Yeah. And he said that even Edgar Allan Poe did a short story on it called Maisel's Chess Player. It's just to put that out there for everyone.
Interesting.
And also, there's a question related to your conference. Can you, the conference you were speaking about, your spring conference, can you touch on that just one more time a little bit on when it's going to be and a little info out there?
Yeah, it'll be April 12th, Saturday, April 12th, and it's at the Hilton Gardens in Hamilton, New Jersey.
Right on.
The website is www.njuf.
I don't know if I've lost you there or not, Dave. I think I had more problems there, Dave. And hopefully you could hear us again. Dave, are you with me? We're back on, Dave. Can you tell us the dates again for the New Jersey Conference?
Yeah, it's Saturday, April 12th at the Hilton Gardens in Hamilton, New Jersey. And the website is www.njufoc.com. And again, the speaker roster just kind of got finalized, so the website will be updated within the next couple of days. So heads up.
Cool. Very cool. Well, I know you had a good turnout the last few rounds, and I'm sure you'll have another good turnout.
Yeah, I'm expecting pretty much a capacity crowd at this point.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'm happy to see a lot more people paying more attention and getting involved. It's a good thing to see overall, getting people out and going to the conferences and discussing it. It's nice. It's becoming more of a casual conversation, slowly but surely.
Yeah, and we kind of make it. I mean, we're kind of old school to a certain extent. I kind of consider myself old new school. So I mean, we still host some of these people at our house, and we have a big speaker buffet dinner the night before that everybody can sit around and like really chew the fat with the other people and get to know them. So it's a lot more personal than most situations.
Excellent. Folks, we're sorry we lost connection for a moment, about a minute or so there. We're really sorry about that. Don't hold it against us. The powers that be don't want the spring conference happening. What's going on anyway? What's going on? All right, Dave, back to business.
What's your next favorite one, Joe?
Ooh, my next favorite one. Well, that's a really tough call because I want to talk about the Sakara bird. I'm not too sure if it's my favorite, but it's very interesting because it was amongst a bunch of other artifacts, and it was quite impressive that it was singled out because of its rear tail. Its rear tail is vertical as opposed to horizontal, and with the proportionate shapes and the wingspan, it was obvious that this thing might take flight. And it's quite interesting because it's made of wood, and I know they won't throw it, but the theory has, even though it's made of wood, it will take flight. It's a glider. And it's really cool because was it done that way on purpose is really the question, because it was amongst a few other similar items, but its tail, none of the other tails were similar. So, Dave, what do you think? Your personal opinion on something like this? First, I should mention, folks, the Saqqara bird was found in Saqqara, Egypt. It was approximately 200 BC, and it's still in Egypt in the Cairo Museum. And you could all take a look at it. It's well known, plenty of information online about it. So, sorry to interrupt you, Dave, but do you think that this was intended for flight?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts on that, actually. if you look at the Sakara bird down by the tail, there's a missing piece there, and you can see where it was notched in at once upon a time. And just like you said, that was by and large, that was a glider. And I think where they found that, there was some sort of inscription, and it says, I want to fly like a bird. And it was funny because I was watching a show recently, and it was a kid over by the pyramids in Egypt, and he was flying a kite, and the kite was going crazy. I mean, he was having a good time with it. But I was thinking, I'm sure kites have been around for a long time. I could see that in antiquity, especially in those times, that they'd have enough, wherewithal to create a glider or a kite or something that could fly. You don't know. I mean, we don't know how that was used. You could get that up on a good elevation and throw something like that. I mean, I don't really know how light the Sakara bird is, but it's certainly aerodynamic. And if it has that tail fin like it looked like it had at one time, I'd put it to just like something like when we were kids. I was always crazy about getting those Balsa glider planes.
Exactly.
The rubber bands.
Yeah.
I was crazy for those things.
Yeah.
And I could see something like this being pretty much the same thing. Kids may have just tossed it around and got a good wind going, and they could toss this thing around, would fly a little bit.
I don't doubt it at all. It's an excellent example even today for a monoplane, a glider. It's an excellent example. And in regards to the weight, it's just a hair over 7 inches long, and it weighs 39 grams, 1.3 ounces. So I would imagine it's fairly light wood. 7 inches an ounce, that's pretty light for a piece of wood.
Well, it's funny because in South America, I mean, in the UFO community, they have those Inca or those Mayan airplanes, those little metal airplanes, and they look like modern fighters, and they always they're always talking about those and ancient astronauts and whatnot. But they actually built a reproduction of one of those and put one of little Cox airplane motors in it, and the thing flew around and it flew really good.
Is that right?
So I was wondering maybe if somebody ever made a representation of the Sakara bird and gave it a crack and see if that design actually flies.
I'm pretty sure I did see something that someone made out of maybe like a styrofoam composite, something similar like that, and it was hand tossed, and I believe it did glide for a little bit, but I guess I would have to suggest the same as you. I would have to, my call on this one would be its intention was either for a toy or for an example of, or, for possible study of flight. We do know that it was found in a tomb, and generally very important things to this person would have been buried with them. It's an interesting example because they certainly didn't make the tail incorrectly. It's
that's aerodynamic. I mean, if you were to put the stabilizer on the back, and like I said, it looks like it had a place for something to be there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little notch on the back side there. So if that was actually completely intact, I see no reason why that couldn't have been a toy glider for a kid.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And there's no birds that we know of in the animal kingdom where its tail is vertical and it maintains flight. So it's very interesting. And again, it's most likely not an artistic flaw. Someone who was an artisan for a pharaoh most likely wouldn't have made this mistake. Someone would have slapped him on the wrist a little earlier into the project, I'm sure. But you had mentioned the little golden artifacts that were found in the tombs in South America, the little flying things, little golden things. What in God's name are those? What are
now
those
that's
supposed to be?
bizarre, and that's actually you may actually know the temple because I don't off the top of my head right this moment, but they have the relief as you're going through one of the touristy areas. But one of the temples actually shows like an airplane, and this is in Egypt. It looks like an Apache helicopter, and the other thing looks like a tank or something like that. But that's fairly well known. And when you look at that, you're like, yeah, it looks just like a helicopter to me. You know?
Yeah, I think that was at the Temple of Narma.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. But I know exactly what you're talking about. Actually, does that hold weight? And by that I mean, is that truly an authentic? Is that truly an authentic carving? Is I think what I'm asking.
I think it is. I think the thing is it's as I remember,
that's incredible.
It's in like a dark corridor, but it appears to be an actual relief there. I was watching something where they were going down that hallway, and the hallway was very dark, and you actually had to light it up in order to get a picture off. But sure enough, it seemed to be that was it. Yeah.
Paulie in the chat room said that the Saqqara bird did take flight. Hello, Paulie. Nice to see you in the chat room, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for the input.
He's guy's been working hard, man. He can't make the show sometimes, so I'm happy to see the gentleman here. He said it took flight, and I think I did see that myself. I think I did. But now, Dave, do you have a picture of that little gold thing? Do you know it well? This little gold figure.
I've got it in my archives, but yeah, I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I mean, I really think that this thing has a face on it. I really think it has a face. Like as if the belly of the plane, let's call it a plane, if it were resting on its belly, I'm not going to suggest, but I would say if I were to consider that the back, it could look like some sort of a fish. He's got a mouth and some eyes. And
others people think they're butterfly representations and stuff like that. It's interesting. The problem is in nature you don't find the rear stabilizer like that. You just don't. That's probably the only hang up. And there's been a lot of speculation, especially early on, exactly what they were, because I think initially they were thought to be representation of insects and stuff like that. But
right.
It's all good. It's all interpretation. And once the ancient astronaut guys got a hold of it, they're like, hey, this looks like a jet airplane to me. And frankly, you can't really argue with them on that particular artifact because it does look like a jet fighter.
It does. It does.
And like I said, they built one and stuck a little model airplane engine in it and fired it up, and it flew perfectly well. So
I also have to mention, I can't refrain from doing it. I can't help myself. But but there's a whole bunch of really nice spirals on this thing. So whoever made this thing here knew perfect geometry. Why the tail is like a rudder, I have no idea.
What I'm unfamiliar with is what's the original? What was the original material made of? Was it brass or gold or?
It was gold.
Yeah,
it's gold.
Well, gold's fairly easy to work, I suppose.
Well, it's quite valuable too. It's I would imagine again, like the Saqqara bird in the tomb, that this was made on purpose. It wasn't just a playful design. It was cast in gold and put in a tomb. And it's incredible because it's again like the Saqqara bird. It has an aerodynamic body. Its tail fin doesn't work the same. It can't be a bee.
Well, that's what I was saying. I was watching a kid fly the kite by the pyramids in Egypt. I'm thinking, in antiquity, they all had flags and banners and stuff like that, and they could see the power of the wind. And I could see them having it tied down with a piece of string or rope or something like that. But you can imagine somewheres in time, a piece gets loose and it's on a string and it's sitting there flapping in the wind, and somebody gets the idea like, hey, I could build something that we could simulate this or whatever. It could be a game for all. It could be a kite, just like I said. But they would have to start to get a rudimentary understanding that the wind has power and that the things can be put into some sort of flight. So,
Well, if there were any way I could associate this thing with a fish, I would say, besides the crazy tail, this looks a lot like depictions and drawings I've seen of one of the earliest pre-dynastic pharaohs. I guess they were just kings before pharaohs in Egypt, of King Narma. He was like the fish god. Just it's similar. I would love to hear there was an association between Egypt and South America way back when, but yeah, I'm not going to throw it that far, because the tale was created this way for a particular reason, and I really don't know what's going on. There's like 4 little strange things down by the tail as well, off the horizontal fins on this thing. I don't know what this thing is, but it's it's a pretty unique design. It doesn't resemble anything else, and it just doesn't fit in really in any civilization. It's just a unique example. It's pretty cool. But there's a few like this though, actually, isn't there?
Well, you run into weird things, and sometimes I think maybe the shamans have a hand in it, because it seems like you find stuff through all these different cultures that the design or whatever the thought is kind of way ahead of its time. And I was kind of thinking like the Hopi prophecy stone, and it has like the rising sun and the German swastika, and their prophecy was that when the tribe sees these 2 signs come up on the world stage, that they're supposed to tell everybody what it means. And evidently they couldn't get an audience with the United Nations the first time they tried, but got it the second time, and basically they said, when we see these 2 signs, or the ancients said, you guys got to watch what you're doing. You're going to create a mess here. If you don't pay attention to what's going on.
Right.
It was something to that effect. But you have something from their antiquity, and it's something that we would never have seen until that point in time. So sometimes I wonder whether the shaman come up with some of these things, and maybe it's maybe they're getting a little glimpse into the future, and they put this stuff in, and now we come into the 21st century and we stumble across this stuff, and we're like, what's this all about?
Well, there's a whole lot of that.
Because you get it with like the Germans with the Vril Society. During World War II, they were talking about that's how some of the flying saucers were thought up, because they'd had these secret societies, and they were channeling this information and blah 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 blah. But most people agree that the Germans were probably 15 years, 20 years more advanced than everybody during World War II, and they're like, well, where were they pulling all this information from? Because they had some really advanced stuff for that point in the game.
They did, and the rate at which they were producing these things was incredible. Something that today, what they were doing in a year takes us 20 years, 25 years. They were just miles ahead. It came fast, and I understand people work very quickly when they're under their gun, literally. But it's still a lot of great engineering came out of there, and a lot of great minds were also were ruined. But imagine we didn't get a whole 24 geniuses out of there. Imagine they stuck around there with von Braun, with our NASA program, and Einstein, and
can you imagine what Germany would be today, Joe, if they didn't go all crazy with the Jews and all that stuff, and they had, instead of turning it basically into the nightmare that they turned it into, embraced all the knowledge and all the smart people that they had, and really used them to the best of their society's good. Germany would be so far ahead of everybody right now, it wouldn't even be funny. And they wouldn't even have to start a war. Everybody flocks towards, pioneering countries and stuff like that. And you have a good thing going, and it's working, and everybody's prospering. Everybody wants a piece of that action. That's the crazy thing about war, but I'm afraid that's the human condition is
power and greed. Power and greed.
That's right. If you could just keep a grip, but sometimes, I remember a conversation where somebody was saying, imagine if they embraced all that stuff that they had there instead of going all crazy and stuff like that. They wouldn't have to fire a shot. They had some of the best minds, some of the best engineering going. They could have had a world economy and not even fired a shot. I mean, and plus you always got you got to figure Germany's gone through 2 major world wars where they basically got decimated both times, and they still run Europe. I mean, they still are a real disciplined group of people where they still, they still have the best economy over there, and you start to wonder, you still wonder, what's going on over there.
I don't know, but you brought up a good thing because they had supposedly developed some sort of a UFO technology in regards to, I'm going to know it as the Bell. I don't know what it was in German. Wunderbar, maybe? I don't remember.
Der Glock.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
No kidding. But now the whole theory behind that sounds pretty good. It sounds like a plausible way to try to travel in space and time is what they were really trying to do. And ultimately, I guess that thing vanished, right?
Well, that's the myth of it. They actually have the area supposedly where this thing was supposed to be tethered up for test trials or whatever. But when you look around, those same structures are there, but they're usually holding water tanks for the city or something to that effect. So,
well, multi-purpose, right? We have to recycle.
Yeah, they had a lot of stuff going on. I mean, they had basically a B-2 stealth bomber, 60, 70 years before we got ours together.
Right. Yeah, it's very true. It's too bad. It is an example of power and greed to the max. But you're right, because they were all about the engineering and the discovery parts too. But it's too bad all the wrong reasons were behind it.
Yeah, I was about to say, as far as the Nazi UFO stuff, there seems to be a lot of lore and a lot of stuff about that. I entertained it, I guess, more early on, but I don't know, man. I think that if the Germans had UFOs and they have some of those pictures where they have a gun turret underneath the saucer and whatnot, you figure if it had the same flight characteristics as the stuff that we see flying around, now and had video of it, years ago, that something like that could decimate pretty much any enemy aircraft at will. Mm-hmm. So,
well, and
why wasn't it employed?
Well, they also are. They were very keen to this Foo Fighting incident too. Are you familiar with those? The Foo Fighting?
Oh yeah.
Not the band. Not the band.
No, as a matter of fact, this week I posted pictures from during the war of aircraft with the Foo Fighters around them, and some of them are solid and they're black, and some of them are bright and round. But
I did see that. It was very cool. Very cool. All right, folks, just hang out for a few minutes. Don't go too far. We'll be back in a few minutes, and we'll continue this great conversation. Welcome back to Researchers on a Mission Radio, hosted tonight, Joe Kiernan and Dave Stinnett. And we were getting into a bit of a discussion about many topics, specifically out-of-place artifacts, or OOPArts. Is that correct, Dave?
Yeah.
OOPArts. And before we get back into our OOPArts, or out-of-place artifacts, I'd like to remind everyone we are the world's largest listener-supported radio station. Here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Please make your way to freedomslips.com's website. You'll find a lot of interesting things going on there on the homepage. There's also a chat room. I encourage everyone to join in. A lot of good discussions in there. Many different topics always being discussed. There's many things. You could even get weather updates. You could get seismic surveys. You get flight tracker. You could track planes if you'd like to. Also would like to remind everyone there's 2 studios, Studio A, Studio B. There's schedule you can get for all of it. I would also like to ask everyone to make a donation We do like to provide this platform, this level of service without having commercial advertisement necessary. And we could also take a look at the Jumbo Emergency Food Survival Pack with over 34,000 non-GMO seeds. You could have many different kinds of seeds, everything you'll need for a restart up if you ever need to, and everything necessary, the breakout kit, everything you'll need from cultivation, irrigation, everything you'll need to really start over. It really does have everything that you could possibly need, and with that purchase is also considered a donation. And there's many other things you could look at. Please take a look around. There's many different apps, and there's even a cool little shop you could take a look at. So, Dave, out of place artifacts.
Yeah.
Interesting topic.
Yeah.
Some would say this could be hearsay. How can we argue this being hearsay? I mean, these are artifacts known to be found in certain locations. There are several of these artifacts that are out of place that I see I see a probability that, like for instance, there was a coin, a penny found in Maine, and it's known to have been found on an archaeological site of a Native American settlement. And this settlement could have gone back 1,000 years or 1,500 years. And they found a Norse coin, a Norwegian coin from somewhere from 1065 to 1080 AD. And, there's just not strong scientific data on inventory and the process of the recovery of this. We know it was known to be found there. This is one of those things where it's just a coin, and there's no definitive actual proof for me that it actually came from this site.
Yeah, what we run into, Joe, is you got to figure modern.
So I can't put this in with like the Antikythera mechanism. That's indefinite.
No.
It's there. It exists. You could go look at it.
Modern archaeology really didn't start till maybe late 1700s, early 1800s, and a lot of this stuff seemed to be popping up around that time. So they probably weren't excavated, with any kind of kit gloves, and things weren't documented properly, and so we are kind of left with a lot of convolution around a lot of these objects.
Yeah, I mean, I would love this Viking coin, this Norse coin, to be real from Maine. That would be pretty cool. I mean, it's still possible. Still very possible. Another.
Yeah, I don't see that out of the realm, Joe. I mean, the Norse were, for my money anyway, were in the Americas long before anybody ever thought they were.
I agree with you. I actually am so convinced on that. It's not even a conspiracy thing for me. It's a no-brainer. That's what they did. They rode the seas, and
there's been enough rune stones through the Americas, especially through North America, that
I'm right there.
There's something to be said for that, because there's been enough evidence that they were here and they were marking territory, long before the people from Europe were rolling in.
Absolutely. I can't agree more with you. It's a no-brainer, even with what I find in my own, as you know, we've discussed with what I see. It's quite apparent to me. It's 1492 really wasn't that big of a year at all, but it was going on long before that. The question is to what extent, and I understand that. But with the Norse island hopping, for them to hit North America, they would have never been more than 200 miles away from any island. So that's really no big deal. That's no big deal now.
Yeah, not really.
Nope. It's just a couple hours. It's no big deal. And all it takes is stumbling upon at one time over the 800 years of mastering seafaring. And
Now, I do have to admit, Joe, I have a favorite one that I've had since I was a kid.
Oh, come on. Don't hold that up.
That's the London artifact.
Okay.
Now, this is a very well-known artifact, and it's funny because I've been able to watch that, and I get pretty much all the archaeology magazines, and you never see anything like this mentioned in those magazines. But this particular one, for folks who don't know about it, and you can put London artifact in the browser.
I recommend it.
It's basically a hammer. It is a hammer, and it looks familiar to all of us as a hammer, but it's embedded in coal or in stone.
Right.
And initially it was dated at thousands of years old, and
well, you know what?
As time has gone on, there's been a lot of different theories and conjecture about how the stone was formed around it. Now, I think one of the sticking points in this, Joe, is that I think they tested a metal and it had a higher chlorine content, something that we don't produce now, or that we were aware that anybody ever produced. So evidently, some of the components of the metal in that hammer are unusual.
It's very, very unusual. The iron content is not what we produce today. We would have to go to basically great lengths to do it. It would have to be made in a hyperbaric chamber, is what it comes down to. It would have to be made in conditions of twice the atmosphere to have those metal properties. Not to mention, it's almost pure steel. The iron content was 96%. It's pretty darn good. It's pretty darn good.
The other thing too is that the handle had pretty much fossilized. Now, you and I kind of guess at this because we always kind of go, antediluvian world, post-diluvian world. We talk within those circles some of the times. But we know the redwoods in California. I mean, we still have some of them there, and I think the oldest tree in California is somewhere around 4,000, maybe in change. Methuselah is the tree.
Yeah.
So if we just use that, it took those redwoods, at least that much time, if not a little, and not less. We don't know what the process is to become fossilized. Now you have this hammer where the handles become fossilized. You figure at the very least. And again, this is where I'm unfamiliar with. Say if it has a high salt content, maybe it drains out the moisture quicker. Blah 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 blah. We don't know how fast that petrification process would be, but you'd still would have to think that would have to be a pretty good piece of time in order to turn it to stone.
Yeah, there was one team of scientists that were suggesting it was only approximately 700 years old, and this again went down to the pressure problem, because the one team that was analyzing it, they were saying it was only about 700 years old based upon the wood fibers. And the other team was saying because of the pressures that it was made under, you're going to get those false readings, and you could clearly tell that it's been petrified. It's much older, and to the eye, the team that got the 700-year results, they were second guessing their own results because they figured it was going to be at least 2,000 years old. And now the other problem they had was the stone has formed around the handle and the hammerhead completely, that it's left an impression, but the stone is formed around it. So it's had enough time that actual stone can form. And when they said this stone here should take, this is a 1,000,000-year process. And they said maybe something altered it, the properties of the stone, which could enable it to form in maybe just a several 100-year period. And they really don't see any answer for that. Either do I. But there's still an answer that has to come up with, how did this hammer come in stone? Even if it's only 700 years old, how is it in this stone?
Well, it's funny, Joe, because Texas is fairly close to South America, but Texas has had a lot of really big ancient things that people don't know about down there. Rockwall, Texas, is a wall that people have excavated before, and I think it's one of Marzoli's Watcher series, but he actually has the guy who excavated the stuff, and he has stones and a whole schmear, and he's just like, there's a giant wall all around this town, and it's been here for a real long time. And then you have the one archaeologist where in that one stream bed they found human footprints with a dinosaur footprint where they thought it looked like the human was stalking the dinosaur. And I think it was like a Christian geologist, anthropologist, or one of those type of guys. But they decided to because it was hard strata layer, they got underneath the layer and tried to get down into the same bed where the feet of the dinosaur and the human were, and they were successful in getting a big chunk of this, and they flipped it over, and the prints continued. So, there seems to have been a good possibility of a really ancient civilization in the Americas. Now, granted, that's South America, but we see enough indication that there's been groups, up in the Midwest and probably on both of the coasts. So,
No doubt about it. So, when you're talking about the footprints, I can't help but think of Michael Tellinger in South Africa with his giant human footprint.
That's crazy.
That is ridiculous because this guy has great credibility, and he's really written some great works, and he really is a great guy to look into for people at home. His name's Michael Tellinger. Excellent guy. Great work, man. What is the deal with this foot? This thing is like 3-4 foot long. It's huge.
Yeah, Nephilim guys like me, the ancient giant group, when you see stuff like that, and that's a pretty good, that's a really good foot representation, but you see that and you're like,
that's stone. That's deep in stone.
Yeah, and that's a big foot, man.
And it really looks like it was mud at once, with you could see like the buildup near the toes of whatever this material is. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
And that's been circulating past couple of years. And when I first saw that, I was like, yeah, that's really interesting.
I've seen a lot of pictures of people going to it, like a tourist attraction. And I don't know. I'd love to hear more about it, but it seems to be just a huge human footprint in stone. And it's baffled, man. Baffled.
Well, again, remember we were talking last weekend about some like Baalbek and some of those great big giant megalithic structures. If you had guys that were tall enough to have footprints that big, making those type of structures wouldn't be all that hard.
Well, then, if we're only talking, let's say 10,000 years ago, let's just say, how would we have it in stone, in the hammer? Things like this. Maybe things were a little different with maybe things really didn't form as long ago as we think.
Well, you have stuff like there's something called the Wedge of Aiud, and it's Aiud, and they found it in Romania. They had dug down to like the Pleistocene and Miocene levels, and they had come up with a couple mastodon bones. But in the meantime, they came up with this wedge, and it looks like it's a big aluminum. It looks like something that you'd stick a wooden pole through, and you could use it as a something to chop with or something to pound with or something like that. But when they and again, here's another one of those stories where they evidently have the material, but as far as the excavation goes, it gets kind of cloudy because they can't find credible sources, yes or no or something. But when they finally had it checked out for the metallurgy, it was 89% aluminum alloy, and we didn't start doing aluminum like that probably until, God, Joe, I don't know, maybe in major production, late 1800s, early 1900s, maybe even later than that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't occur naturally. So somebody had to manufacture this. So somewhere in antiquity, someone had the knowledge to do aluminum long before we did. So you run into that. You run into the same thing with you run in with the hammer. Someone has high metallurgy skills, and by our current dating methods, that shouldn't be so.
Right, it shouldn't be so at all. If I'm not mistaken, I believe aluminum's even a difficult metal to extract from stone. To isolate it.
Oh, the process is brutal. I mean, if you've ever tried to do it like from scratch, where you're
Right.
I mean, it is. You're absolutely right. It's a nightmarish procedure.
And I know plenty of welders will tell me that it's an art just to weld aluminum. It's very few can do it, or very few will do it, I should say. It's very delicate but strong, lightweight, strong, but its properties are difficult to work, no doubt about it. And yeah, that's a recent thing. That's in our metallurgy. That's new to us.
Well, I think they found that in Romania like in 1976. So even if it was down with mastodon bones, you're gonna have to throw that one, providing it actually was.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to give it some sort of dating, pre 19th century. So
Right.
still, it's still popping up before we should see it popping up.
Are you familiar with the stone spheres of Costa Rica?
Oh yeah,
Giant stone spheres. These things are massive. Perfect spheres. You know, one of my beautiful platonic shapes right here. It's pretty cool. 12 tons, not bad. 12
somebody
tons.
was saying that they were currency. I'd heard somebody giving one of their hypotheses on those stones, and they were saying it was currency or something to that effect. And I was thinking, yeah, that's kind of hard to carry around in your pocket, you know.
That is amazing. I would love to hear that story.
That was bizarre, and it was somebody fairly reputable.
It's a great story, nonetheless. I'm sure it's a fantastic story. Wow, because this thing is massive. I don't even know how you move it. I mean, thank God it's a ball that you could roll this thing somehow, because I would say this thing's 6 foot across. You know, it's 12 tons. It's enormous. I don't know what kind of currency exchange would be built on this thing.
Yeah, it was a bizarre.
Well,
it was a bizarre dealio, but.
Well, I just find it fascinating that anyone could carve a circle at any size, and then to have this enormous circle. I'm not shocked that it's not anywhere near stone, because it's you could roll it, but it's pretty cool that very early times they were able to make an absolute perfect sphere on such a large scale. It's pretty impressive.
Well, it's funny because I in passing tonight I mentioned to you, because you like your Play-Doh and stuff like that, and while I was doing some show prep tonight, I had stumbled across something I'd never seen before, and evidently they'd found these 1,000. They say they were 1,000 years before Play-Doh, and they're called the 5 Platonic solids, and they're dating them somewhere around 2000 BC, but they were found in Scotland, and they're in the shape of the Platonic solids, and it's bizarre, but they're like, these
How
are
could that
2,000 years old. So I'll pass that article when I come across it over to you. But I found that very interesting, that here are
cool.
Geometric shapes of stuff that they probably shouldn't have had, but evidently they not only had it, they had it in a form that you could hold and see and observe and understand.
Well, it's pretty cool, because I understand the Platonic solids, obviously, and why they are, because he wrote them down, but he didn't invent them. He said that they were much earlier, but history has always said that we thought they were possibly going back to Homer, and that was argued. So that would have been 800 BC or so, 400 years before Plato. And there's really no proof of that. So to find something that early from Scotland,
exactly,
would be amazing. It would be pretty cool to see.
Being a Scot, it's an old culture, but
pretty cool.
that's a bizarre dating. And when you see it, you'll see exactly what I mean. When you see the 5 of these things, it's bizarre.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
So what's your next favorite OOPArt,
My
Joe?
next one is, I've kind of been reluctant to talk about it, only because I can't pronounce it. But we have, I'm going to say it. It's a stone head, and it was found in Mexico, and I think it's the Tecaxic head. That's
good luck.
Tecaxic. And it's just a big head. It looks like maybe the guy's got some sort of a headdress on, a hat. Maybe he's got some sort of a cone head. He really does have European features on to his face. A European style mustache, beard. Very European look to the guy's face. And it's from a larger statue, but only the entire head remains. And they feel it's a Roman piece, very early. Even feel the hairstyle is, and the beard, everything is just completely in style with the Roman statues from the 2nd century AD. So it was found in a burial chamber, a grave, in obvious pre-Columbian times in Mexico. And
it does look European. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Man, he really does. I mean, he looks like if I were to draw a caricature of an early Viking or something like that, you know.
It's funny because if you look at some of the statuary down in South America and the Aztecs and Mayans, some of it looks like, and there's speculation because some of it looks Oriental, like Chinese or something like that. I mean, the reliefs don't look like natives; it looks like Chinese, and there's a lot of speculation that the Chinese made it down there just as well.
Yeah, especially the Olmecs. They really those large heads they carved. They really did look of Oriental design to me. But this statuette really does look European. It was most certainly found in a large grave of goods, and it just doesn't fit with the rest. It's just not even the figure that's on there. It's the whole art of the carving. It's not their style. It's nothing fits. Could it have been something from a large deluge, like other things washed around? Who knows? I have no idea. But I'll tell you, it's darn similar if this was just a random carving, because the stone wasn't even local to the area. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, I think I heard, not heard. Let me see where I found that here. It was 600 miles to the quarry for the red granite. So it's pretty cool. And granite would have been a Roman choice as well. But there was another stone known as the Mystery Stone. Have you heard of this one? The construction workers found this one near Lake Winnipesaukee. Whew, that was a tough one. It was found.
Yes, I am actually familiar with that one.
Of course, the lake or the stone. Lake Winnipesaukee.
Yeah, I mean
it's egg-like. It's a very egg-shaped stone, and I'll tell you another perfect example of fine craftsmanship. If someone was able to get this thing into a perfect shape of an egg like this. But it's interesting is the designs that were on there. We have corn, ear of corn, a face, definitely a face. I almost want to say it looks like a sun with a face. Mm-hmm. We have arrows, a bunch of dots. My spiral is present. There's a hole that goes through the middle of the stone. They feel it's Native American, and it's quite possible. It sure looks like it's in great condition. It's still in New Hampshire where it was found, but that's about it. Except it's pretty cool. Could be a hoax. I don't know.
I actually have a really good one. This is one that people have probably seen on one of the old UFO shows on the History Channel, as I remember. But there were these springs and coils that were found during a 1991, 1993 expedition for some prospectors in Russia, and they came across, I guess, as they were sifting through all the stuff looking for gold, they kept coming up with all these little weird spirals and filaments with spirals around them, and they're wondering, what's all this stuff? And it was evidently there's tons of it. It's kind of spread across an area. And I know, doing some research earlier on this subject, that there were some industrial places that were doing work, but they weren't in that area, and evidently they weren't being dumped in these particular areas, or if there was any dumping going on at all. But some of this stuff was made out of like tungsten, and when they went to date these objects, it's a pretty wide swath they paint here, but they say somewhere between 20,000 and 318,000 years old, depending on the depth at where they're finding these things. But these are very super fine micro filaments that they're making that are there, and when you put them underneath a microscope, you're like, wow, this is some really bizarre looking stuff. It looks like micro circuitry of sorts. And I guess if you're familiar with a machine shop, when you're working a piece of metal and you put the gouge into it and it spins that coil out, or you're drilling through a piece of aluminum, you get that coil. It's something like that. But the fact that they're saying that these things are, if you just go at the load date of 20,000 years, it's a pretty good run to be popping up something like this.
Oh, very true. Now, there's also, when I was mentioning that huge, perfect stone sphere, there's also a whole bunch of these. Have you seen these little tiny spheres that they're found everywhere? There's millions of these things apparently.
Are they the ones with the little round indentation around the center?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I don't, I've really ignored it. I've heard this thing come up so many times, but because I don't know. To me, they always resembled like early. Yeah, but I guess
there's an old case. There's an old case on this, Joe, and in a previous life, I had a family that was Argentine, so I got to learn some of the stuff about their bolo techniques. But I had watched some program, and I don't know if it was down there or not, but there was a gentleman on his farm, and he had like a rock face cliff, and it was one of those. It was a lot of sandstone. There was a lot of layers, and you could sit there and with a little pick hammer and a brush and do a little excavating and do a little archaeology. But there was a guy who found one of these things, and it was within that strata, and it was pretty deep. And that had been there for a pretty good clip of time. And so instead of removing it, he knew exactly what it was, and it was one of these things. And it does look like something they would use to catch animals. Well, how long the bolo was in use in antiquity, I have no idea, but I have a feeling it's probably been around for a good bit of time. The slingshot's been around for a bit of time. I don't see why that wouldn't be. But he brought scientists there to see for themselves where this thing was in the strata, and basically they hard-assed this guy. They were like, you could have placed it in the strata, blah, 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 blah. And I think it was basically just dismissed, but he had taken pictures of it, and he goes, this is where it was found. So yeah, those are bizarre. I don't know quite to make of them, but the problem is you can't date rock, right, Joe? So
right.
That's part of the problem.
Well, it is. I mean, they have ways to get a good idea, but even that's debated. Where they try to read the magnetic position of the crystals in the rock when it was formed and where it was found, and I guess it's too complicated for me to agree.
Well, that's exactly what they do. They use the isotopic compounds that were supposedly, because that's what supposedly they're using those ice core samples, is because they can measure what the atmosphere and what was in the atmosphere at that time, and they can correlate that to a certain time in recorded history. So if they come across something with that compound at those levels, according to the ice samples, this is the time period that it should be in. But yeah, I think a lot of problems that we have with this type of stuff is the geology guys. I mean, there's a lot of circular reasoning going on with dating stuff. I mean, we all know that the reptilians and stuff like that, they sink immediately upon death, and the mammalians have a tendency to float on top. So they may be dying at the same time, but they're not hitting that same strata at the same time. So there's a problem there. And
trees used to be huge. As you mentioned, you were talking about the redwood trees, sequoia trees. There was a whole bunch of trees in Australia, New Zealand, I think even more New Zealand, and they were called kauri trees, or at least that's what they're called now. And these trees were alive like 50,000 years ago or so, 30 to 50,000 years ago. And these trees are enormous, just like the redwoods and sequoias. They're huge. I mean, they have to just like the giant trees out west, they have to just cut the trunks into sections, just like into 10, 15 foot long sections of trunk just to haul it off. They're huge, but
do they have a date on this, Joe?
Well, yeah, they were like 50,000 years old, but I left out a major part that they're buried under dirt, and a lot of farmers started finding them, and so now they're basically just digging up these fields and pulling them out. They're in remarkable condition, and they're amazing for furniture because they're so old, and the weathering it's taken has caused some really, really nice rich grains in the wood. It's very expensive wood, this kauri wood, but these trees were alive 50,000 years ago. They're enormous, and something happened and leveled all of them, and they've been buried in this dirt, and now they're harvesting them.
You were saying something tonight, and I don't know what it triggered, but it was funny because it was exactly kind of what you're saying here. I was doing business a number of years ago in the UK, and I had taken a tour of one of their old coal mining, operations, and it was called Big Pit, as I remember. But they took us down a pretty good clip, Joe, and there was one section where, like in the coal or in the dirt or whatever, and you're a pretty good distance, there was like a tree trunk there. I mean, and there was probably a few of them, as I remember. But you realize that there were trees here, but there's a lot of dirt on top of these things, and so somewhere in time, this was the ground level,
Well, with these kauri trees, New Zealand is an island, very earthquake prone, and they said these trees were most likely wiped out with a massive tsunami or something cataclysmic to that effect. But they still got instantly buried in a lot of soil, with a whole giant forest, just, with 20 feet of soil was encased on top of these things.
Yeah, and that would have to
remain so for this number of years, right?
Yeah, that has to be like airtight in order for those not to rot. That's fascinating.
So it's a lot more than a wave to me, because there's an enormous deposit. And
you have those guys somewhere in the South, I think, where, or maybe you're in the Virginias, but when they used to do a lot of logging, and some of these logs would sink to the bottom, and it's the same thing. It's like evidently these waters are very cold. There's no bacterial growth or anything like that, and they're harvesting these logs off the bottom of these rivers now. And the wood, I mean, the grain is just gorgeous, and it's exact same thing you were saying before. These have become very highly prized, to have something made from this wood.
Yeah, well, they do. A lot of the hardwoods do age nice with under certain conditions if they don't dry out. But apparently some of them do pretty good in water too. I've seen a few of those shows, and I don't know what kind of money they get for them, but people are buying them apparently.
Yeah,
I was unaware there were so many damn logs at the bottom of rivers.
Evidently, there's quite a few.
My goodness. My God.
Now, just to get back to another point, I was going back before with the dating and stuff like that. I thought this was fascinating. They took a group of geologists or something to that effect out to where Mount St. Helens was, and I think they had blindfolded them so they couldn't see where they were going into. But they had excavated an area, and they were looking at the face of this, and they were trying to determine the age of it, and they gave it something, some crazy, ridiculous age, millions of years or whatever. But when they basically were told where they were at, what had happened was this was part of the Mount St. Helen flow through that valley. So it only had happened within the past 20 years, but they were already dating this thing as millions of years. And this is something that I'm sure it happens a lot over time. So maybe some of this stuff that we're finding may have come from some sort of cataclysm, so it's not as old as we may think they are. So it's something to keep in mind.
Well, that's something you threw it out earlier, that if there was an enormous deluge, that things could have really been shooken up. There might not have been much of currents. It could have just been, things were just getting washed around. Like Japan had a tsunami, which globally it wasn't that big of an effect, but we're still seeing it. Things are still coming over to the West Coast. Imagine a global event. I guess I can't imagine it if artifacts were really going from continent to continent, stone artifacts and such.
I have to admit, I'm a proponent of Pangea. I think that somewhere in antiquity, all the land masses were hooked up together. I mean, we know that they were, but I think there was trade between the Americas and the Egyptians and stuff like that, and maybe that cataclysm is what separated the land masses, for all we know. So,
right. Well, maybe it really wasn't that long ago. Maybe
imagine if you had land masses or something happening where those land masses were breaking apart. Imagine the type of tsunamis you get. You get a global deluge.
Yeah. Probably a large bathtub effect. Big swishing around back and forth. I would imagine those continents, if the Americas and Europe and Africa split a lot quicker than they think, I would imagine it would have been a major devastation. Obviously. But there goes to the Atlantis thing there, too, right? They're supposed to be out there. But back again to those little balls. Those things are found everywhere. And I'd really like to find out why, because it really seems like they're everywhere I turn. They say there's more. They look like gunshot balls, from revolutionary times.
Yeah, they do.
I don't know what their story is. I don't know. So we had a few things here that, again, suggest back to my possible ideas that I'm sticking to with my creationist theory people here, that I think atmospheric pressures, there's a lot more symbols pointing in that direction.
It's funny. I was going to say, in that realm, there's something that guys like me and a few other researchers, we stumbled across. I forget what isotope it is, but it's like strontium or some 233 or something like that.
Wow.
What they found was that it has a half-life of, I don't know, like 30 seconds or a minute or something like that. But it's a very short half-life, and they can see what the I guess the residue is once it it dies.
Okay.
And they found it in granite, and the only thing that they could think of is that it would have had that strontium and the granite had to be made exactly at the same time, and the strontium within that granite in order for it to have that half-life and leave that trace. And it's a bizarre thing because you start getting into, all right, well, what happened here? I mean, how are isotopes and granite being formed at exactly the same time, where the granite's rock hard, but that strontium particle's in there and it's dying at the same time with a very short half-life.
Right.
It's bizarre.
That is bizarre. But this again falls in with the London artifact, the hammer, and Michael Tellinger's giant foot. How did these things come within stone? And it appears that the stone set rather quickly, because in the case with the London artifact, the sediment should have corroded that handle of that hammer away. Because if it takes 1,000,000 years to produce that kind of stone, the sediment should have eaten it away, especially if it wasn't fully encased in stone, whereas some of it was exposed. Like
somebody had thrown out that, and it wasn't too far off. You could imagine it anyway. Was that concrete only needs a few components. It's water, it's lime, and sand or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Those are pretty common things, and if you had them, swirling around whatever that area was, and deposit on that could harden up, within a day or two, and you would get that same style effect. I think that the hard part is the metallurgy with the compound of that, and the fact that the hand is petrified and the handle is petrified. That's where you kind of run into a problem.
Yeah. And with Tellinger's giant foot, I look at that and say, pretty cool. It's a huge foot, but how could the outline, the whole footprint itself have lasted so long to form into stone without weathering to take place, erosion or just water? It looks like it was mud at one point.
You got to figure that's standing straight up where the toes would be pointing up.
Yeah.
So that would have had to have been at ground level at some point in the game. So something is moved that huge rock into that standing position. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I don't know enough about it to question it. I hadn't thought about that. I thought maybe it was naturally put vertical, but maybe someone stood it. I don't know.
No, I'm thinking it was probably a natural. It probably went
so?
naturally. I can't imagine somebody going out to that area and wanting to winch that big rock straight up.
Oh, man,
But it's bizarre.
It really blows me away on how a footprint could like that. I would just imagine just weathering a few rainstorms would wash away so much of the detail. It just leads me again to say, did this stone form rather quickly that we see in a few other places? But history tells us no, it doesn't. It formed at a particular rate. That's how we age Earth. That's how we age time.
Yeah, we usually get the contradiction, Joe. It's like it either over long periods of time or it can happen real quick. So the geologists and time people seem to get the best of both worlds on that one. It's either one or the other way I look at it.
I know. I think I'm going to predict that in years coming we're going to see a few more good examples that the atmospheric pressure was much higher because it's we could see it in a lot of places, Dave. But
yeah.
It's real simple. It's when air pressure is down, and it's going to rain most likely. But if the atmospheric pressure is low for a week straight, people get sick, people get colds, and flu season happens. But when air pressure is generally high overall, people are doing pretty good. So imagine it on a larger scale. Imagine if our air pressure was twice as good, we would be feeling much better. We feel great on a nice high-pressured summer day. It's when the pressure is really low, everyone's joints start hurting. People get all groggy. They get all miserable. They get colds. And it's just something to look at. I think we're going to see a lot more of it to come because I've recently read a lot on the ice core samples that they're thinking the same thing, that what they thought as a particular section of an ice core sample from Antarctica, they thought that was a 10,000 year period because they were assuming 10 years at this level were compressed into 1 year. So now what they're thinking is that's not the case at all. It's all each individual year. So what they thought might have been 10,000 years ago was really only 1,000 years ago. And that's up for debate because that's
tricky. I mean, there's so much. There seems to be so much play and all that stuff. I always say to everybody that the stuff that you and I were taught in high school, most of that stuff is wrong now. So I mean, I'm sure whatever they're teaching now is the present model. So somewhere down the road that'll change.
Yeah.
Or hopefully it'll change to the point where we can, suss out exactly what we're saying here. Something was different then than it is now, and
Right.
now we found that proof. But I tell you what, Joe, there's one more of my favorites, and this is probably
Let's get another one in here.
Yeah, probably one of the best documented ones.
Nice.
And we're lucky, and it was like somewhere around 2002 where the Chinese reported this on a major news program. But it's called the Langzhou Stone, and what they found was it was cracked open. It kind of looked like a really big, like coffee bean.
I don't know about this. Tell me about
it was
this
black. Yeah. Well, when it split open, it had a threaded metal bar inside of it. And the thing was that after they had done some of the testing on the rock appeared to be meteoric. Now, in 2002, they had a big news thing saying that more than 10 geologists and global physicists and whatnot from their local colleges studied this and the origin of the stone, and evidently they came to the conclusion that it wasn't man-made, and they consider it one of the most valuable stones in China.
Wow.
So I mean, here you have a threaded metal bar tightly enclosed in a black meteoric material, and we got lucky on this one because it got modern dating techniques. It got modern scientists, actually trying to see what the deal is on this. So again, this is bizarre because it's meteoric. So, what do we have here?
We've always been fascinated with the meteoric stones, but they're incredibly hard to work. They generally are just almost pure steel or nickel.
Yeah, and that's when I don't know if we were talking about it on the last show, but it seems that in antiquity anyway, I think in Europe, that the meteorites were highly sought after because that metal was so pure and they could work it, that every town they had a special sword that was made from this because they thought it was from the gods or from God or whatever, and the Japanese have basically the same type of thing, and one of the guy who actually invented the samurai sword had a big prayer thing and wanted some sort of sign, and he saw this stone, saw this meteorite, tracked it down to where it was, took this stone, and through his prayers and whatnot, the samurai sword is what he came up with. And when he sent that into battle with the emperor, not one of those blades came back broken, and they had won the war, and he became like the sword maker. But evidently, in antiquity in Europe, every town had one of these swords because they were considered magic to a certain extent, or blessed, and these were used to battle anybody trying to come into these villages or cities. It was a good luck piece of sorts.
I wonder if this is where the legend of the sword from the stone comes from.
Good possibility.
I wonder.
It's an old one.
Well, I would imagine if I had a sword made from a meteorite, not only would it be pretty cool.
That'd be way cool, wouldn't it?
Not only would it be really cool, and I'd show everybody, but I would imagine it would cut through another blade, as those samurai people say. I could see that happening just from it being, 99.9% pure steel, as opposed to just the hand-worked iron, which was pretty darn good nonetheless. But it's a huge difference.
Well, the design, because he laid it so the heavier edge was on the outside of that curve. So I mean, it was balanced, and it was
Because I don't think we were able to produce steel till Carnegie came around. I don't think we were able to produce it. I think that's
why some of those early samurai swords they hit the market from time to time. But when they go on sale in Japan, those are private bidding auctions, and those things can go in the hundred thousands, or if not millions of dollars, for some of these really old swords.
Right. It's pretty incredible.
It is incredible.
I remember hearing a story about a particular samurai sword, and someone was interpreting the engravings on the handle, and it was marked with the 6, and he was he was letting me know that it was tested, and when they put it through the test, the Emperor's Palace puts the stamp on it, and it meant that that sword was able to cut through 6 bodies in one swing, and they have to test that sword. So they
there's an interesting piece of information.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean,
that's crazy.
It's wow. Thank God they weren't mass producing these swords. It took them a month or so to work them all day. But I guess they had a perfect design, though. They really didn't change the design on those swords.
No, they're done in really small batches.
They're pretty cool.
One of the last samurai sword makers, I guess. And he's still, I mean, it's a religious experience as well as it is anything. But I mean, the process is, that same kind of Japanese honor type thing where it's all done in a very ritualistic kind of process.
Yeah, I admire that.
The finished product is something that seems to be worthy of all that time and care and prayer that they put into it, because you have a really beautiful, weapon when you're finally done with it.
I really like how no matter the civilization, when a stone falls from the sky, they really revere that stone. I can only imagine seeing something like that in ancient times. I guess even today it'd be pretty cool, because if you see shooting stars, I've never actually seen something come down where I can go and recover it. And
well, it's funny if you look through like antiquity or some of the papers and stuff like that, and you have discussions about these stones falling from the sky, and there's actually a line of thought at one point in the game where basically people saying that's impossible, rocks don't fall from the sky. But I think with the Enlightenment, they probably woke up a little bit.
Dave, we got to cut it short, man.
All right, Joe.
All right, everyone. We'll catch you next week. Thanks for tuning in, and stick around for more great programming from freedomslips.com.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
These guys are hammers, and to hammers everything looks like nails.
I heard that.
You were meant to. So you see something that's important, you call it out, and we'll make it happen.
Okay. Mother Nature is a serial killer. No one's better, more creative. Like all serial killers, she can't help the urge to want to get caught. And what good are all those brilliant crimes if no one takes the credit? So she leaves crumbs. Now the hard part is seeing the crumbs for the clues they are. Sometimes the thing you thought was the most brutal aspect turns out to be the chink in its armor. And she loves disguising her weaknesses as strengths.
If you can fight, fight.
Head north if you can. Hello? Is there anyone out there hearing this?
Help each other.
Mexico City has been declared complete loss.
Be prepared for anything. Our war has just begun.
We are the hammers, and we are the nails. The world stands upon the precipice of total insanity, and we need you, and we hope you need us, bringing information, news, and as much truth as we can eke out before Mother Nature turns us to crumbs. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, working to become millions of voices singing in unison to bring the sanity back home.
Enjoy your
extra big ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another?
Extra big ass fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you.